when I mentioned this idea of running the Milwaukee Marathon, I shared with you that it was challenging because it was hot. It was really, really hot. And I also mentioned that although difficult, I managed to make it. I crossed the line, right? And I shared that with you. And while there was a part of me that enjoyed that, I also knew that deep down inside, and it's one of the reasons that I love running, is because it's so metaphorical about life. And I want to share with you the lesson that happened to me during that race that I didn't share with you. And so, as usual, when I go into a run, I do something like that. Like, I'm prepared. Like, it's not like I just rolled out of bed in the morning and said, let's go run 26.2 miles. That's not the way that it works. And I would not suggest doing that. Don't do that. So I'd done everything I could be to be ready. So I trained, I did all that stuff. And while I won't bore you necessarily with the details of it, let me just say that I honestly had some expectations going into that run. I did. I mean, I put a lot of time and effort in getting ready for this thing. And so in my mind, I'm like, well, if you do put in the work, then there should be something that happens. Right? Everyone's going, right? Yeah. So again, I had my plan. How I would run the first half versus the second half. I had an idea about the pace that I wanted to run, where I would get water, and so on. And so again, I show up at this thing and I'm ready to go. I feel good. I'm excited about it. You know? But as time started to get closer, all of a sudden I started checking on the weather. And again, remember, this is the first week in October. I'm expecting cooler weather. Wouldn't that just kind of make sense to expect that? One would think. So, but as the dates started getting closer, what I noticed was, in fact, the temperatures actually weren't cooperating at all. In fact, instead of dropping, just the opposite was happening. So all of a sudden, we're starting to go through a late fall hot flash. And that's what's happening. The heat wave was coming, and we were actually 20 degrees above what normal temperatures are at the time, right? So, I'm looking at the app on my phone, and I'm sitting there looking at it, and then all of a sudden, here it comes, right? Here it comes. This isn't fair. I put all this time and effort into this race. This isn't supposed to be like this. Right? And it's just, there's a battle going on, right? I mean, I'm trying to fight this thing, but I also know reality, and I also know what's going on inside of my head. And so I sat there for a few moments, and of course, what happens when you start thinking about this is I start getting a little bit upset over and over again. This isn't fair. And all of a sudden, now I went from, and this is what I've been talking about recently in my talks, I went from this idea of being a conscious, powerful creator, and guess where Mike was starting to go back? I'm now a victim. I'm a victim. And guess what you get to do as a victim? Nothing except be a victim. That's all you can do. That's what makes being a victim so easy. I can't do anything about this. There's nothing I can do about this. Woe is me, right? And so, after a while, I was sitting there, and there was still a few days left. So, the only thing I could do is say, well, I hope something changes. So, over the next few days, I just kept checking and going, come on. I'm trying to zap my phone with energy. I can control the weather. Yeah. Ask me how that worked out. So, anyways, but I kept checking, and of course, nothing changed, right? And as every single day went by, I kept going deeper into this woe is me, and kept getting a little bit more upset, a little bit more, until finally the day before the marathon. Well, I don't know. What kind of a state of mind do you think I was in before the date of the marathon? With me sitting there saying, woe is me, there's nothing I can do, there's blah, 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 victim. That's pretty much where I was, right? And so I'm driving into town, and I actually stop at this rest area, and I get out of the car, and first of all, I open up the door, and my God, was it hot. I mean, seriously, it's like I'm looking up, the sky's going like, are you serious? It's not just kind of hot. I mean, it is blazing hot. There's not a cloud within 200 miles. There is no breeze. I mean, no breeze. There's no trees. There is no anything. And I get out of the car and I'm just like, oh, okay. So I go into the rest area and I'm sitting there and I come out again, feeling the heat, and it's oppressive. It's like that hot. And I was like, oh my God. And I'm just sitting in my car and, I can't swear, but I swore. And I'm like, oh man. So I'm like defeated, I'm sad, I'm a victim. And I sat there and all of a sudden, I just took a deep breath and I said, well, God, I guess there's nothing I can do about this, so I guess I'm just going to put it in your hands. I'm surrendering it to you. And with that one thought, what I can tell you is that things energetically for me went from over here, victim, woe is me, there's nothing I can do about it, life sucks, I suck, everything sucks, right? And when I made that decision to put it into God's hands, all of a sudden, the heaviness of those thoughts that I was having lifted. And the sadness about not being able to run the race that I had hoped for, that I had trained for, that I did everything for, was gone. It was like, wow. And I mean, energetically, I can tell you that I felt it. It wasn't a mind thing. It was a heart thing. And there's a big difference between the two of them because one doesn't involve God. One involves our head and doing everything up here. But I'm telling you right now, if you want to have the real experience of God, it doesn't happen here. It doesn't. It happens right here. And that's what happened, is I let go of the ego and I went into my heart. And all of a sudden, I had a thought. And the thought said, well, okay, Mike, then what can you do? What can you do? So I thought for a moment, and all of a sudden I realized one of the things I could do is I had a choice. I can decide to fight what is reality, that it's 85 degrees and it's hot, or I could just say, yep, it is what it is. That's happening. And so I could go into full acceptance of what's going on and just go, yeah, it is what it is. Or I could reject it and fight it, right? And energetically, if you've been there, you understand that, yeah, you can fight reality or you can accept it. And if you stop for a moment and feel what's going on inside of you, when you fight reality, I'm just telling you, for the most part, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't. Energetically, when you sit there and look at something and say, no, 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 energetically, the world's looking at you going, yeah, but yes, 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 yes. And that's what happens. And then the other question I had was, well, I have a choice. Do I want to do this with God or not? Do I want to do this with God or not? To me, I can either engage with my own divinity and engage with God and have God be with me in all of my processes, up and down. Because, spoiler alert, I'm just going to tell you, when you start doing this work, and yes, it's wonderful to talk about love and joy and compassion and all those things, but I'm just going to tell you that stuff is going to continue to happen in your life. And some of those things, I'm going to tell you, you are not going to like. You are not. I don't know why things show up the way that they show up, but they do. And so, would you rather be completely isolated and never touched and be in a bubble, which isn't life, that's not reality? Or would you rather be able to live your life and have spiritual tools so that no matter what happens to you, you can get through it? I don't know about you, but to me, I much rather prefer living my life fully, having the complete experience of it, highs and lows, but having the spiritual tools to do something about it. So when you know what hits the fan, you're here. You're grounded. You're like, yeah, I got this. Why do I have this? Oh, I don't know, because I'm divine. Why else do I have it? Oh, I don't know, because I have God. Walking through life knowing those two things makes a total difference in terms of the way that you show up. It does. But it takes some practice. It takes practice. It doesn't happen overnight when you start learning about this stuff, right? And so I was sitting there contemplating all of this stuff, and I could still feel this ping pong match going back and forth in my head, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's not fair, nothing I can do, I'm all alone. To, hey, there is something you can do. And hey, there is God. And hey, you can actually have an experience where there's God, and there's joy, and there's happiness. And yes, it's 85 degrees. Yes, it's hot. All of those things are true. And yet you can still have an amazing experience if that's what you want. So when I thought about that, I went back and I thought about Byron Katie. Who's familiar with Byron Katie's work? She is beautiful. In fact, I just thought about this. We need to get her some of her books out in the bookstore. So she's written a famous book called Loving What Is, and for those of you that have read it, you know this. She's got a process that she has, which is fabulous. But I love in the book when she talks about this thought or this idea that there's only three kinds of business in the universe. There's mine, there's yours, and there's God's. She goes on to say that much of our stress comes from living outside of our own business. And she says, when I think you need to get a job, you should be happy, you should love me, I'm in your business. And she says, when I'm worried about earthquakes, when I'm worried about floods, when I'm worried about war, or when I die, guess whose business I'm in? That would be God. Or if I'm thinking about it's going to be 85 degrees tomorrow, guess whose business I'm in? God's. Right? She goes on to say that if I'm mentally in your business or God's business, the effect is separation. Oof. If I'm in your business or I'm in God's business, the effect is separation. I realized that every time in my life that I had felt hurt or lonely, I had been in someone else's business, not my own. Oh, that's heavy, right? So I sat there and I asked myself the question, hey, Mike, whose business are you in right now? Damn. I hate it when I'm nailed like that. You're just like, sometimes truth isn't real convenient. It's not, but it's truth. So it's true. And you've got to look at it and ask yourself and be honest with yourself, like, look, I call BS. I call BS. Look what you're doing, dude. You're in God's business right now. And so the answer was pretty obvious. And as I sat there longer, the solution obviously was for me to focus on whose business? Focus on my business. Focus on that, right? So in other words, what can I do about this? What can I do about this? Well, the answer was pretty simple, and I put it right back to where it belongs, which is inside of me. So, all right, well, so what could I do? I simply surrendered it right back into God's hands and just said, hey, God, this is in your hands. Please take this from me. And I just sat there and I waited. And it didn't take very long, but all of a sudden, I had another thought that came up. And it sounded something like, all right, here's what I know. I know that God's here, because God's kind of like gravity, he's always on. I know that I'm connected to God, and I know there's no shortage of ideas, divine ideas or divine mind, which is what we have access to when we can be quiet and try to connect into it. So I said, there is a solution to this that will be helpful. All right, Mike, so what can you do then? And I sat there and I thought to myself, and I said, well, how about starting off with adjusting your expectations about the race tomorrow? in terms of your time. Would that be a good idea? Yeah, probably not a bad idea because you're not going to be able to run the race as fast as you wanted to run it. Okay. So in other words, could I slow down? Yeah, I could do that. That I can do. And then I thought, well, I could also change my plan and adjust for the heat. And so what does that mean? Well, for example, normally what happens is, so in a marathon, you have aid stations where they're passing out water and stuff like that, right? And normally when I run a marathon, I don't stop for those. I run through them, grab it, go, boom, I'm off. I said, well, what would happen if you just stopped and took a little break and maybe drank a little bit more water or Gatorade or whatever? What if you did that? So I started to come up with solutions on what I needed to do to make sure that I was safe, because you can hurt yourself in those runs. And just instead of looking at it like, yes, I'm going to hit this particular time, what if the goal now became to just absolutely just love the fact that, do you know how many people at my age are able to do what it is that I do? And I'm not saying that from the standpoint of bragging, I'm just being honest. I am blessed with this machine that I have. It goes, man. It goes and it goes and it goes. So I could sit there and just be like grateful that I'm able to do this. And I'm one of very few people at this age that can still do it. And so I could be grateful for that. I could be grateful that I get to go check out a city. I love cities. Cities fascinate me. They have since the time I was a kid. Milwaukee's a killer town. It's super fun. And so I got to hang out in a really, really cool town. Guess what? I also met some other runners and some other people. So I got to connect with some other people. And the next thing you know, all of a sudden, this energy that was going from, woe is me, there's nothing I can do about it, and just feel that. Can you feel it? Yeah. And all of a sudden, now I'm over here where it's like, I'm like, giddy up. Let's go, man. I want to go rip the head off this thing. Literally, I'm not kidding you. It was like all of a sudden I'm getting fired up and ready to go. And here's the thing that is incredible about the story to me, maybe not to you, but it is to me. What was the difference? What was the difference between me here and me over there? What was the difference? Your attitude. My attitude. Folks, this is at the core of the message of the Unity teachings. This is the core of being able to be conscious. I became conscious. I became aware of what I was thinking, which was crap. It was garbage. And what did I do? I stopped myself from doing that. Why? Because it made me feel horrible. And by the way, that's what happens when you think crappy thoughts. You will feel horrible. Why? Because you've got this thing inside of you called your emotional guidance system. Anybody ever hear of it? Yeah, and those emotions are a mirror to your soul. They're a window into what's going on inside of me. And when all of a sudden you realize that, and all of a sudden you realize, so in other words, Mike, really what you're telling me is you just need to get rid of your stinking thinking. And you can go from being a victim to standing over here and being a powerful conscious creator. And all it takes is a moment. This didn't take 14 hours for this thing to happen. It didn't. It just took me being consciously aware of what I was thinking, understand that my thinking was off alignment with what my experience wanted to be. Why? Because I've told the universe, I want to have a really good time. I want to have a really good time. I want to enjoy my life. I want to have fun. I want to laugh. I want to sing. I want to dance. I want to run marathons. And the universe is sitting there going, let's go. And then all of a sudden I'm over here, and really what it felt like was like the universe is going, hey, like, I just remember what you told us you wanted, and where you're at right now, you ain't going to get there. That's what the universe is doing. It's saying you are not in the right space. What do I mean by that? My head and in my ego, right? Is there any shame, blame, guilt, or judgment, by the way, when the universe taps you on the shoulder and says, pay attention? Not an ounce of it. Not an ounce of it. It's just a gentle reminder, hey, pay attention to what you're thinking. Pay attention to what you're thinking. Pay attention to what you're thinking. That's why you feel like crap. And the minute you shift your thoughts, then what happens is you're connecting to your divinity. You're connected to unlimited ways to solve your problem. And then all of a sudden, things start to lighten up for you. And all of a sudden, these ideas start to flow. That's it. Because you're connected now to what Unity calls the divine mind. You're connected to Source. You're connected. And you have limitless possibilities in terms of the way that you can handle it. There are no limits to where and how you can solve your issue, whatever's going on. Limitless, right? And so all of the other things that I was focusing on were completely 100% out of my control. They were. So in other words, those other things were not my business. And the minute I shifted over to what is my business, well, my consciousness is my business, my energy is my business, that I can do something about, and I shifted it, then everything started to change for me, right? And so in other words, I could go from having this negative attitude, from victim, 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 woe is me, and I get to basically step into the space where I am now a powerful creator. And I can go back to wanting to have fun, having a good time, laughing, singing, dancing, and, oh yeah, running a marathon.